Do you need encouragement to turn tragedies into your own triumphant life story? If so, this podcast is for you. Listen to powerful guests who have persevered through challenges so you can gain strength to build your championship life. The host of Professor of Perseverance podcast, Dr. James Purdue.
Hey, come on in. It's time for us to get some education. So fire me up. All right. We got things sometimes in life, we have struggles, and what do? We need to whine and cry and bitch about it, or we can overcome it, move forward, do the best we can. I mean, sometimes we struggle like this dude here coming through. Watch out. Oh, it's that time of the year, right? So watch out. It's that time of the year. We got one trying to get away from the old cooker and everything. So let's be careful out there. All right, so buddy, I hope you get away with it. We'll see what happens here in the future. So, hey, so we're struggling, and so we need somebody to help us get through. We'll think back what somebody on the podcast said, and go, they can help me get through this. We've done something. All right, today our guest has overcome adversity and trauma at an early age, has built resiliency. You're going to talk about some childhood trauma that went on, a trait that has remained with her throughout her life and has helped excel as a corporate executive, mentor, and leader, for which she is often characterized and dynamic and unstoppable as a characteristic. And so let's go get her on here. Welcome on the show here, Victoria Pelletier, author of the book Unstoppable: Stories of Change Makers Who Have Dared to Make a Difference. Welcome to the show, Victoria.
Thanks for having me. Glad to be here.
I'm glad you're here and everything like that. Hey, I didn't mention to you earlier, but I'm not a professional at this. I just have fun. We try to learn and help other people, and we go from there. Hey, Brittany, thank you for coming in. Say, hey, tell AJ I said, hey. All right. So, all right, Victoria. So we're glad you're here, and we're only a few days from that Turkey Day, so we have to watch out that turkey. He's on the loose. So we have to go see if we can catch him or not. So, all right, Victoria. So thank you for being here again, and your story. I'm glad I can see the ending here where you're at so far with what you sent me. So, but let's catch us up on how you got to where you're at today.
Yeah, happy to. And what's really interesting is that there was a time and place where I was very uncomfortable sharing more about my lived experience. In fact, I was built sort of walls and barriers around myself to protect myself and insulate me from it. But as I started coaching and mentoring more and more people, I recognized that for me to share my professional and personal, both failures and successes and what had gotten me there, I had to start sharing a little bit more of what I call my why, right? Long before Simon Sinek became famous with his viral TED Talk, Start With Why, I was trying to understand other people's lived experience because I had significant challenge myself. That was what propelled and drove me forward, particularly from a career perspective. So with that preamble, I'll share that I was born to a drug-addicted teenage mother who abused me severely, pushing me upstairs, downstairs, a cigarette in my eye, wore a patch for a number of months. I was in and out of her care in the child welfare system. And I was fortunate to be adopted by a loving family who certainly was far from abusive for me, who loved me dearly. However, it wasn't sort of all sunshine and roses from a socioeconomic perspective. I always provided. I never had food insecurity. I always had clothes on my back, but they came from Kmart. I never had, what my friends had. I didn't get to go on school trips. I lived with this fear of no longer abuse, but more so the fear of rejection and what that meant when the person closest to you, your mother in particular, was so harmful. And I attribute that to me leading this, what I call it, this unstoppable life, this life of, what I've, coined no excuses. And I sign a lot of my social media posts with that, and it drives my children nuts. I will tell you that. But I believe you have a choice in terms of, how you get up from adversity and obstacles and challenges that come in front of you, and in terms of how you're going to move forward with that. And it's taken me many years to learn to have a much healthier level of resilience versus just those barriers or walls I originally put up.
Well, when we put those barriers and walls to help keep us together, to help keep us, what I want to say, into our own boat area where we're not rocked, the boat's not being rocked, and so it's our comfort zone when we built those up. But we also can realize when we can let those down that there's a bigger world out there, and we can really have some fun, but we can still be hesitant and then go from there. But yeah, those barriers are put up for a reason, and we understand that.
Yeah, for me, I had some early lessons. I said that, it's what propelled me from a career perspective. I started working when I was 11, in large part because my family didn't have a lot of money. So if I wanted extra things, it was on me to buy it. But that was the area that I knew I could control. My ability to show up, perform well, have a very strong work ethic. And that's what propelled me to, get promoted at a very early age. But those barriers and walls around me, I became an executive at 24. I was promoted to chief operating officer of a company I was working at, which was a pretty big stretch role. So I had a bit of imposter syndrome for sure in that role. I was also the only woman. I was the youngest by probably 2 decades. But that fear and those barriers, I kind of showed up all business all the time. I never would have shown vulnerability for fear of seeming weak,
Hmm.
showing emotions. And I found out several years later that my nickname was the Iron Maiden. And
There you go.
I know. Well, on one hand, I remember at the time I was like, "Am I insulted by this? Is this a compliment?" And I think it was a backhanded compliment. On one hand, I'm kind of known as the turnaround queen. I take distressed businesses or business units and help make them perform. I'm very strong at managing and coaching people to perform, but people didn't see the emotion behind that. I've been through 18 mergers and acquisitions in my career. Those come with really difficult decisions and reorganizations.
Hmm.
And early in my career, I didn't show that, despite the fact that I had the ability to make those decisions and execute, it was still actually pretty painful for me. And there was emotion behind the impact that some of those decisions had on people's lives. And that was kind of a moment for me where I realized to, build trusted relationship with the people that I engaged with and worked with every day, I needed to not only show emotion, I need to be vulnerable. I needed to share a little bit more of myself.
And I'm going to go back a little bit here when you were talking about growing up and your clothes from Kmart and whatnot, where other people are, getting more. I don't know what back then were the higher big shops to shop for then, but I grew up in the time when I was cooler than I thought I was at that time. We were so poor, we were getting from the Goodwill,
Oh,
and people, me growing up, we were made fun of how poor you were going to the Goodwill and get it. Well, shoot, man, it's the popular thing to do. People are always going to Goodwill now and getting the bargain deals, and these kids are proud that they've gone to the Goodwill and got this. So I was cooler back then than I thought of. We were made fun of. Now we can turn around and say, "Hey, who was the nerd, man?" We were cool back then, but we just didn't know it. So, yeah, and so you have to grow up fast. You had to grow up fast. That's obvious. And so, and then even being going to your foster parents again, things were better, but still could have been better, what you're saying, but people, we do the best that we can and go from what I'm so much more proud of hearing your story so far is how you broke the chain. I mean, I would hate to hear that you were just like your mother with your children and then finally broke the chain, which I would have been glad that you did. But I'm glad that your children are not going through what you had to go through. So I'm glad you broke the chain there on that from there, that they don't have to learn from it and they break it.
yeah, no, that it's absolutely the case. I mean, never laid a hand on my kids other than I have this like all consuming. I remember like joking with my daughter. I'm like, "You're so cute. I just want to bite you." Like that like total love. Like that would be the closest that my children have experienced. But what I is so interesting though is I had a conversation with my son around, he's gifted, and he said, but I was pushing him hard. He wanted to go to one of the top engineering schools, and I remember saying to him, like, "Buddy, if you want to get the grades to get into that school, you're actually going to have to study and work hard." And he points around our home at one point and he goes, "Mom," he goes, "I don't need all of this. I am fine with mediocrity." And I talked to him the other day. I reminded him, he's now 22 and soon to
Hmm.
graduate college, and I reminded him of that. And it's true. I mean, he really has no need. He goes, but he said, I said, "How did the apple fall so far from the tree, this drive?" And he goes, "I think it skips a generation."
There you go. So, well, and it's awesome that the kids are, again, I'm just so glad they're not had to go through that. So I'm
Yeah.
glad that you were wise enough and put up with enough that you didn't, because you hear so many stories of it just repetitive, that it goes from generation to generation and finally somebody breaks it. So I mean, I don't know how far it went back with your mother that you finally broke it. So, but I'm glad you did, and there was no doubt, because of your mindset to be what it is. I have no doubt that you're so successful in your corporate careers, because again, you've used what brought you down to be resilience to what moved you forward. So,
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it was, as I said earlier, it was how I showed up from a work perspective. I could control that. Now, you can't control all the scenarios and customers and clients around you, but again, how I showed up. And so that was the thing I leaned into. I remember my mom, and my mom being the woman that raised me, said to me, I think I was 11 or 12. My nickname was Tori.
now you're talking about your mom who raised you, the foster parent.
The ones they adopted me, yeah.
Yeah.
And
Okay. Okay.
so she said to me, she was like, "You need to do better than us." And I remember kind of thinking, like, and she meant socioeconomically.
Hmm.
But for me, because what had happened, I was determined I would be better than the biology I was born into, my biological mother and
Hmm.
her family, or the circumstance and socioeconomic status that I then grew up in. So she didn't have to tell me those words, utter that to me, but I was determined I was going to be better than. That was the thing I could prove myself and my worth. And I leaned very deeply into. So, working at age, 11, I think I became assistant manager of the shoe store I worked at 14, by 16, working in a medical office, by 20, and senior manager. And at 24, I became COO. So I began working and much earlier than others to have sort of had that runway to become an executive. But again, that was what I knew I could do to control and perform and be better than, as my mom had said, the circumstance. My dad was a janitor, my mom was secretary. So
Today, janitor is called a custodial engineer. So I was a school teacher for a while, and we we they were calling these other teachers whatever, something something whatever. And so finally one day I coined for our janitor, said when you go by the principal and they say something about a janitor, you go, "We're the custodial engineer." And so put it back on them is what I would tell them. So um, I can't stand when people are so uppity, and they want to use engineer in their title, but they don't want to say janitor. I said, no, you tell them you're custodial engineer. So
that's right.
it's, yeah. All right. So I'm wondering this now. Here's with your early on training at 11, 14, early on did you go to college, or you developed all this from your self esteem and what you learned through the system and how your mindset was to again do better? So did you learn all this from hands-on experience and who you've been around with? Go to college and learn combination of everything?
So I did go to college, but I wouldn't say I learned any of my business and leadership skills from those years in college, quite frankly.
Mhm,
That was on the job training,
mhm,
where I learned a lot of that. And I often get asked to, who are my mentors? And the sad thing is, I haven't had very many positive mentors in my career. In fact, it's been the opposite. There's some people who've been horrific business people and leaders that instead they were kind of these reverse mentors, and that I looked at them and I said, I'm going to be nothing like you,
exactly, yes.
and tried to model the behavior and language of the type of leader and business person that I wanted to be. And what's interesting is I actually thought I was going to be a lawyer. I think my mom had me watch too much LA Law as a
There
child.
you go. My
Court.
mom's 82. That's one of her favorite shows. Law and Order, LA
Oh
Law,
yeah, I love all of those.
Criminal Minds. So
And so it's funny because I will often tell people, like, follow your passion. My daughter, so my kids are 18 and 22, and my daughter asked, she's the younger of the two, when she was 14, like, Mom, what do you think I should do for a career? And I said, Beauty, you need to do what you love to do, and the money will follow. And she's like, well, what is that? And I said, well, I think you have two paths you could go down. I said, one is being a teacher, and particularly with special needs, because she's amazing at that and was babysitting special needs kids. I said, or you could be a salesperson. I said, because your ability to talk your brother into anything, and you could sell ice Eskimos.
There you go.
She said, which one makes more money? And I was like, oh, okay, that's the little bit of me, in there, and that drive hard. And I said, Beauty, I could tell you that. I said, but it completely go against what I'm telling you around following your passion. And that's what I did. So it turned out that although I wanted to go to law school, I really enjoyed the business world, which I worked all throughout college and got promoted. And I thought I was going to take a year off before law school and stayed. And then I was helping a friend of mine who was a police officer who wanted to get promoted. And so she was doing her MBA. And some of the case studies that she was doing, I was helping her with. I thought, like, these are real life examples that I've personally been through in business. And so at some point I said, well, heck, I'm not going to get an MBA to pay $60,000 or $80,000 for something that, don't get me wrong, I could still have learned, I'm sure, from that experience and great networking, but it wasn't going to contribute significantly to my career. And so I tend to, when I look at hiring people in business, I want, if there's functional skills that they need, absolutely, I'm hiring for that. And a lot of that comes from college experience, but otherwise, particularly for hiring other leaders, I really want, people that are going to be a right cultural fit, and many who've had hands-on experience versus just textbook.
I think nowadays, and of course, being in sales, I think could fall in here. You don't necessarily have to have that degree anymore. You just got to have the knowledge, read a bunch of sales developing books, the knowledge, again, the go get it attitude as well. And I know there's more to it than that, but still, I think that is one area that I think you don't need a degree. You can have a great life. Well, like you said, without putting in $100,000 to have to pay off on for most of your life.
Yeah,
So,
exactly.
yeah, and tell your daughter that if she was to get into education, and I understand you said special needs people, they again, I'm in a wheelchair, so I got to watch other teachers with special needs. I did the regular classrooms, and they are so much underpaid. They lump all the teachers into one category, that you make so much on this, by the years experience, degrees you got, whatever else and everything. But to me, special ed teachers need to be paid a heck of a lot more because of all the daggum paperwork they got to do with their IEPs and everything for each student. And they don't get paid extra for, and they are so underpaid. And so I hope somewhere along the line people wake up and give them that extra money,
Oh
because
yeah.
all that work, they deserve more money. So, all right.
Teachers in
Go ahead.
general need to get paid more money.
Who does?
Teachers in general.
I agree and also disagree, because I've seen how it is,
Mhm.
and I think they're doing pretty good overall. But again, anywhere you're going to say they deserve more money. So, well, except for these athletes, I think they're getting paid way too much now. Um, And don't get me wrong, I was wanting to be a professional athlete, so I would want to be in that category. But now I'm in a wheelchair. I'm not in the category. You're getting paid way too much to play a game. So,
Right.
but I mean, the money's got to go somewhere. Than just the owners are getting everything too. So, all right, that's a different soapbox for me to get on that one. So, all right, Victoria. So, jumping in line, what one or two advice would you give someone trying to get out of a situation and to improve what to do?
So when I think about what I'll call resilience, I've learned, and I'll say learned because I think there's an element of, like, resilience and the ability to handle adversity that certainly can be innate, but I also think it's like a muscle and you can improve it over time. And as I said, I don't think I always had the healthiest level of resilience, right? Those barriers or walls that I put up around myself. And I had to learn how to develop a healthier way of handling adversity. And for me, first of all, kind of first step in that is being really clear on what goals and objectives I have for myself. They can be small baby steps, like I want to lose 5 or 10 pounds by a certain date. It could be the career aspirations or starting a new business, whatever the goal or objective is. Number one. The second one for me is to be incredibly self aware and self reflective. And I remember my mom probably like into my like preteens and teens in particular sitting me down at time for hours when she could see I would act out in a certain way or have an emotion. And she's like, Tori, like we need to figure out what is it? What is driving this? And that the ability to be really self-aware and understand where the actions, thoughts, or emotions I'm having, like what's caused that. And that's again why I try and understand people's why, their lived experience, what's driving them. And then the next step in that, the third step would be then once I have an understanding of that, trying to model the positive thoughts or the actions or behavior or language that I want to be or I want to see. That's one step further towards that goal or objective. And then the last step in that process for me is giving myself permission to fail. Right? We are going to stumble. There's going to be things that come in front of us that we can't control. And even if we can, we're imperfect human beings. And so giving ourselves permission to fail, stand back up, dust ourselves off. If you have an emotion, and I'm very quick to emotion, whether it's anger, sadness, happiness, have the emotion, but then anchor yourself back on that beginning, step, which is what's my goal? What's the objective? One foot, or one, roll, sort of if you're in a wheelchair, one proverbial step at a time.
I like the line. I'm going to make this as my next book here. People say, when you walk a step in my mile or walk a mile in my step, mine's going to be when you roll a mile in my tracks. So,
Yeah.
yeah, and go back. I'm big on the failure thing too, because if everything's always given to you and you're always moving and you're not learning really, you're not learning how far you can be tested on yourself, how you can go after, and in real true life, failure is going to take place. All right. Sometimes we see it like a freight train coming straight at us, but sometimes it comes and we don't know it until it's already here and past us, and because it's unexpected. And so, yeah, so what do you do when it's unexpected? Now you take from all your other experience and training to pick it up and see what you can go for it. So, yeah, I'm big on the failure to learn to do better. And not that you want it. I mean, if you can go through something and not fail, that's awesome. But in reality, it's coming.
Yeah. And I think, real growth comes also from the things that make us uncomfortable. And that can be the fear of failure, but it can also be trying new and different things. And so I encourage people to lean deeply into the things that make them very uncomfortable, because only with that do these new doors open and growth comes.
Well, and it may be in a new purpose of your in life. Okay, I tell people, not that I want to be in a wheelchair, but now they give me a different way of looking at life. Again, I wanted to be this professional athlete beforehand. Well, that's out the door. So what are you going to do now? And so I had to learn to do things a little different, and got into teaching, and got me here now podcasting and stuff like that. And so from there, it's amazing how. If we look back far enough, how we were trained to be where we're at today somewhere. When I first went to college after I got injured, a friend of mine was in the radio station at the college, and he invited me to come listen, and I got involved, and I ended up getting my own show over there. And you're talking, it was 25 years ago, 30 years ago. And then here I am using that experience to do this podcast. And so it's amazing how we look back far enough, what we've done has prepared us for where we're at. So,
Absolutely. Yeah.
hey, let me ask this question here now. Talk about your adopted mom. You consider your real mom. My I never met my real father. My mom and dad, they divorced before my first birthday. He was abusive. My mom got out of it, and she remarried. And that stepfather, I consider my dad. And I've told people before, and I've said it on podcasts, he was the one that busted my butt when I needed it, and I sure needed it growing up. But he's also there that hugged me and told me he loved me when I needed it, where the other one never did any of that. Okay, so let me go back to ask this question here. Did you ever reconcile with your mom? Uh, any forgiveness would happen? Ever communicate or talk to her anymore?
I
Anything like that?
yeah, so well, first thing I'll say is for me, much like the way you view your, I guess I'll say stepfather, for me, my parents were those that raised me.
Exactly.
And so I'll very much appreciate that, and they treated me very much and loved me very much as though I were their biological child. Um, and so my adoptive parents knew my biological mother.
Hmm.
And so they moved across the country after adopting me to create some time and space,
Hmm.
uh, away from her. And so Julie is my biological mother, and she reached out to my parents on a number of occasions. I remember she actually came to visit. I think I was probably 6 or 7 years old, and actually she slapped me in front of my mom, and my mom instantly kicked her out of the house. And it was like,
Oh, okay.
that's it. And she tried to stay in contact. Usually she'd ask my parents for money. She landed herself in jail when I think I was 11, for stabbing someone. um, she contracted AIDS, HIV, as a result of drug use,
Yeah.
probably whatever. And so actually she passed away many years ago. She and my adoptive mother passed away within months of one another.
Oh, okay. Wow.
Um, and my biological grandmother, who, it's funny you talk about like the cycle. So my biological grandmother was um, I've heard from my biological aunts, probably slightly physically abusive to all of the girls, but definitely mentally abusive. And my grandmother tried to get me to see Julie on her deathbed, and I chose not to.
Yeah.
Um, I know that the opportunity was for Julie to probably make amends before she passed away, with me and what she'd done. And I wasn't in a time and place that I thought she deserved it. And I didn't, I kind of try and live drama free. And I just
Yeah.
felt that invited a lot into my life at a time I had just given birth to my second child, that I didn't do it. And I don't have regrets
Yeah.
with, quite frankly. And my grandmother's still alive, and the closest she could do is to sort of reconcile. She sort of apologized because she was very aware of the abuse and did nothing about it. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, no, I've chosen not to, like I said, sort of have drama in my life, and so I never got close with that side of the family.
Yeah. See, with my dad, like you said, I just say biological sperm donor, you know,
Yeah.
um, because we never really met, and he lived longer. He died at 35 from cancer.
Mm.
But all I can say was I just hoped he got the best out of his life he could. I don't hold any regrets or anything. I don't have any hard will from him because I ended up getting a better dad. So even though I never met him at 1 years old, obviously I never got a Christmas card, birthday card, anything like that. And so obviously I got the better dad in the long run. And so, yeah, so I'm like you. I don't have any regrets, but only thing I did just say, I hope he has the best life that he wanted, the way he was doing. And so I can see with your mom, biological, what do we call her? Not mom, biological birth giver to you. That I would hope that she had the best life going, but again, it sounds like she didn't really change and didn't really try. It sound like so. It's sad, but I'm glad again that you have broke all the chains and everything, and from there, and then glad that you're having the best life possible. And again, you got so much that you can share with others that have been through what you've been through, and show them the way that they can be what's considered in your book unstoppable stories of people with change makers who dare to make a difference. So, anyone's you need a book, need something to read, Unstoppable, okay, by Victoria. So, all right, get you a copy. It's about that time of the year, Christmas. They make great Christmas gifts, I bet you. So, all right, Victoria. Well, thank you for being here. This has been awesome meeting you. And again, I just get so excited when I hear people where they went and how far they've come, and I'm just man, just so powerful for me to learn and see how breaking the chain. I mean, I'm just so glad to hear all that. So,
Thank you. Thank you. I'm really happy to have been here today.
hey, go ahead and give your website, any social media, anything you got going on other than your book, and how you can help people with coaching or whatever you're doing, and let us know.
For sure. I mean, the easiest way to get a hold of me is just through my website, which is victoria-pelletier.com. I'm sure it'll be in the show notes so people can just look up the spelling of the last name, or you can Google me on most of the first many pages that come up. And from a business perspective, certainly LinkedIn, I'm one of the early adopters there. You can find me I do a ton of public speaking. So on a variety of topics, including overcoming adversity and resilience and diversity and inclusion, leadership, culture, all those things. So find me there. The book you can access there as well. Appreciate
And
it.
for the listeners at the moment, if you're riding down the road, getting this Pelletier, Pelletier. Okay, then you can go back and Google later. So yeah, that's what I tell people: just Google Professor of Perseverance. I'll be there. So all right, thank you again for being here and sharing your journey, your story. And again, they say 100 years from now, this stuff on the internet's there to stay. So you're going to help somebody in 100 years. Just think of that. So from there. All right, hey, everybody else, thank you for being here. I'm Dr. James Purdue, the Professor of Perseverance. Be sure to share this out to someone that can use a good pick me up and see where the beginning was and where the ending has come to at this moment. Still have plenty of endings to go here. So do something today, tomorrow, something next week that's going to help you persevere past your